Hello and welcome back to another episode of Let's Go DC tutorials. In the previous tutorial, we discussed about creating an iOS application using Swift, in which we discussed about how to fetch an HTTP request using a URL session. Also, we had a short tutorial on how to actually optimize your if statements using something called as a guard statement. So continuing on the interesting part of creating user experience, let's move on to creating a user experience like this or a user interface like this by actually creating a table view and including the table view cells in it. So let's get started. So to create that, let's go to our main storyboard, which right now does not have anything. We need something like a label at the top, so let's do that. Go to the control section, search for label, and then you can directly drag and drop a label here. Extend it to almost full length so that if the label content is longer, you can include it. But in this case, we know that it's going to not change. Also, you can customize your label font based on your requirement, but there are a set of fonts which are by default available from which you will have to use. So I go with the Helvetica, contents bold with 18 as size. So now we need to create a table view. So you just choose the table view and then drag and drop it. So it has to fit in the whole content. So once that's done, we can do layout based on auto layouts, which will make it compatible with the multiple resolutions as well as multiple or even if you are actually doing a horizontal or vertical movement of your device. So hold your control key and then drag the particular control and decide on what kind of constraint that you are adding. So I have added a left and a top constraint relative to this view, and also you can add some constraints like width and height, which should match according to whatever I have added here. So now this control will lay out as per the constraints that we have applied, that it needs to always keep this distance from top and left, as well as should have this width and height in whatever devices it is being rendered. So next step is to do the same with the table view. So it has to always have this distance constraint we have set. Also, it has to always have a trailing and leading space from the actual view on which we have placed it. So those two, plus we need to always make sure that the width and height is always maintained. So with these constraints applied, if it becomes this blue in color, that means all the constraints are fine. There are no conflicts existing. So we have rendered a label and a table view right now. Let's add the outlet to the view controller for this table view because we'll be using this reference in the code base. So again, control and drag, then it will give you the option to add a label, add a outlet. Let's call it table view movie list. So that adds the weak reference of that table view to the controller. So as far as the controller is concerned, or as far as the controls which we have laid out here, it is all fine now. Next step is to create individual cell which we will be showing, like each cell should be designed. For that we will create a table view cell. So let's just choose this. It will give you an option. There are multiple options available. From that you need to choose Uitableviewcell and name it accordingly. We'll call it movie item view cell. It is a Uitableviewcell. Also let's include the XIB file, which is actually the layout file on which we will be placing the controls. Once that is done, it will create two files. One is a Swift file where you will have all the code behind, and you will have the rendering control here. So let's decide on a width and height for that. So this one is using, let's randomly choose like 359 by 272. We have our control here. That's the height. Okay, doing it wrongly. 259. Two 72 by 359. So that's our width and height defined for the time being. So what all we need to render an image, we need to render two labels, and there is a overlay transparent background view also, along with a button which is to make it with favorite. These things we need to render. First thing is to choose an image view. Let's just skip a little. Let's just keep a little padding so that I can easily add the constraints. So we have added an image, and then let's include some images which we need to use in our case. Let's go to my design. I have let's move all the slices I have already taken out from the design. So we need to have all the x2x and 2x versions to support multiple device resolutions. So I have all the images now, and I'll be using these as currently I'll be using this one to set the background. So this is poster image default, and let me go back to my design, to the user. So that I have rendered here. I'll make it as scale to fill for the time being. Let's see how it goes. So this is my background for the image. If there is no image, then by default it will show this. Next step, I'm not setting any constraints. Let's keep it for the next tutorial. Let's just concentrate on this device resolution of iPhone 7 for the time being, but I'll show you how to make it fit for each and every other resolutions later. So I have this now, and I need to have a view. Around somewhere here, let's keep it, and let it take almost 3/4 of the width of this design. Let's make the background color as black, and let's give it a alpha of 0.75 so that a little bit part of the background is visible to us. Now let's keep some labels on top of this. I need a couple of labels. Let the color be white. And keep it as condensed bold. Let's have a font size of 18, and I will call it movie title for the time being. This will get replaced with the actual movie title. I also need one more label to show the release date. So this is black, this is white. Again, make it a custom one. Keep it light. Let the font size be a smaller one, 14. Keep it as release date. So we have now the title and the release date added. Let's go on and add an image view. So with this Xcode 8, we have an option to zoom, which is a pretty good option provided. Let's see where this view is. There it is. So on top of that, let's add our round shape. So there you have the round shape. Let's make it as spec fit, so that, or even let's make it center, so that it maintains the width and height which I have defined in the design. Now this is set. Let's add the button on top of it. Don't need a title for the button, but we definitely need the image, which is the favorite image, in an unselected state. that also is added now. So let's check what all is there. So I think we are all set with this cell. We have all the components required. Let's do something as simple as creating or adding the references or the outlets. So we need to have outlets for the image view. First thing, let's call it image view movie poster. We need the title. Let's call it label movie title. And then label release date. And finally an action for adding to favorites. So let's make it action add to favorites. So this is something we will be taking care at a later point when we actually do offline database things. Like I'll be introducing how to use a realm database and the core database which comes along with Xcode. So those two things we will be handling it in a future episode. So for the time being, let's keep it added here. So we have all the outlets ready. Next, let's see whether we have missed anything there. So as far as the cell is concerned, we have everything. We just needed the outlets and it is available now. So let's move on and create the table view dependencies. We already have added the table view. Now next step is to register the table view cell to get the cell identifier, which is something required to handle or to reuse the same cell multiple times, which is an optimization done at the Xcode level. So we need to register the nib. The nib is nothing but our design or the xib file. So for that, let's call the nib. It is requiring a nib to be added. So let's add it. Movie item nib. It's a new UI nib to instantiate it. We need to use the nib name. In our case, it is movie item cell, which is over here. So that being added, next step is to pass the bundle, which in this case we can use nil, and then pass this name over here to register. And we also need to give it a name. Let's define it here because we will be reusing it. Where let's call it movie cell identifier. Let's name it movie cell. Can be a length. So it's not going to change. Then let's pass it over here. So we have registered the movie table view list, and after that step we need to do something at the table view design level, which is adding a couple of dependencies. First is associating the data source to the view controller of the table view, and also the delegates required, which is like on click and everything. So those two after added, we need to include the table view delegate and data source protocols. Once that is done, you'll get an error to include the methods which needs to be implemented as part of the protocol. So let's do that. So once you type table view, you will get all of the things required. First is the height for row. So we need to define a height. So let's choose from our design a random height. Right now height is 272. Let's keep it something around 300 so that we get it is for each row. So we need to have a buffer height required so that there is a little bit of spacing between each table view cell. Next is to render the cells. For that we need cell for row vet. So that once you have this, we need to get the cell that is from the table view, or we don't need to call this, we already have table view here. We just need to call it EQ reusable cell, which is using the same identifier which we had defined. So let's just call it here. We have the movie cell identifier, which is the reusable one. Here it will be the index path. So once this is done, you will get the table view cell. Also we need to make sure that it is our table view cell. So cast it to movie item view cell. So we have received our cell here. So you can see that after that is being done, you will get the properties which are exposed, which were the outlets which we had created. We have the table view, movie layout, the title, everything is arrived here. So let's start binding it. First step is we already have the results here, which is already received at this point when we call the fetch upcoming movies. So it is already being called somewhere on viewDidLoad itself. We are calling it the fetch configurations, and then after that we are receiving the upcoming movies list, and that will populate this variable movies result. So the same we are going to use here. So let's get the movie item. From the results, we already have an array. Pass the index and the row. So this will fetch us the movie item. So we don't need to actually do a casting because it's already a movie item. So we don't need to do that. We receive the movie item. Next step is to bind it to the cell. So we will have it. Just call it movie item dot. We have the title. And then the release date. And then return the cell. So for the table view, have already done a couple of things. One is to set a height, and then it's giving an error. Okay, we need to set it up to text property. those things are sorted now. So we set the height, and then we call the cell for row index for each cell, how to render, and finally we need something called as number of rows at section. So this will actually tell the renderer that these many sections or these many rows are existing. So for each section, so we just have one section. For that, again, we will have to use the same array, movies array, and get the count. Return that. So we have done the binding here. We're calling these three methods and then doing all these operations. So next step is to run and see whether we get the output. We don't see any results. That's because we have not yet reloaded once this result is back. So our movie binding is happening at a later point, and we are not telling the table view that the array has been added and you need to reload. So for that we need to actually call it on completion of adding this movie array somewhere around this point. Once that gets called, let's see what happens. Gives you an error. Let's check what it is. So it's saying it could not load the nib in bundle. So the exception is happening because I had given the name wrongly here. So the nib name is movie item view cell. Let's correct that and let's see whether it runs now. There it is rendering. It is giving you the title and the release date, which we have bound for the time being. Image is not yet downloaded. That we will see in the next tutorial, how to download the image and load it. So this pretty much covers. Let's make some modifications here. It does not need a height of 300. Let's keep it at around 280 for the time being. And also in the view, this table view does not need a separator, so let's keep that none as well. So this is how it is looking now. We have successfully rendered the movie, number of movies which are coming from the API, and we were able to bind the title and the release date currently. So let's move and do the image download and binding in the next tutorial. Also, we need to see how to make it fit in multiple resolutions. Even now it is not fitting as per the resolution. If you see, let's say, if you rotate it right, it will only take up the width which we have defined in the design, but it has to fit the whole layout with size. That we will look at in another tutorial, where we will be setting the auto layouts for each and every cell in the table view. So thank you for watching this episode.